Do you think the resistance to mandatory labeling has bred any of the skepticism or fed any of the skepticism? I mean, it's kind of interesting that we're in this moment where GMO labeling is being debated in Congress, but it's 20 years later. It's come, it's a belated sort of climax of that debate, and the Senate now has a bipartisan compromise to create a national solution. It's not mandatory on pack, it's mandatory disclosure, which can include a QR code or some sort of symbol or on pack.
A symbol or words.
Yeah,
I think
so there's flexibility there, but do you think that, I mean, people who don't understand this at all, don't understand the science, they hear, they don't want to tell us. Do you think that message has hurt the technology?
I do, and I don't think it's been handled really well. And labeling is a complicated conversation with all different viewpoints. Just tell you where our company stands is we have always been supportive of the voluntary labeling systems. I personally think that's the best approach. So if you've got a USDA organic stamp, by definition, that's non-GMO. And then there's a variety of services that support the non-GMO project. That's the way the system should work, because if the food company is going to benefit from selling a differentiated product, and they're gaining the profit or the marketing advantage of doing that, then they should absorb the costs for that system. And that's would be a very rational approach. What we have opposed is the mandatory labeling at a state-by-state level, because to have farmers who have farms in one state and another state have to have different segregation systems for their crops to comply with different laws, and I think it would hurt farmers, it would hurt the food companies. The solution is mandatory labeling at the federal level. That's effectively what we have with the organic standard. The organic standard, modulated by and put in place and maintained by the USDA, is a national federal standard.
A non-GMO
for
labeling
non-GMO.
Yeah.
So the way to do a mandatory label for GMOs is to do it at the federal level, so that all consumers have access to the same information, and it's not done, in a haphazard state-by-state fashion. And so I think the compromise that's on the table today makes a lot of sense, and we would fully support it.
But the industry has opposed.
Yeah. A second to your question of why it's more volatile in food, and I think part of it is also that the thing about science and biotech is that it accelerates our ability to do things. So we can make bigger jumps in technology. We can make them faster. And historically, we've made those jumps slowly and over time, and we've had a chance to adjust and kind of see and get used to it. We're moving really fast now. And that then begins to, and you put it into food, where so much of food, it's also a debate about the food system. And so if you are opposed to the monoculture in farming, then the advent of GMO crops that actually help that, you really get into a debate about some of the underlying values that we have in our food system. And I think that also makes it really complicated, and also very important then to parse out what we're arguing about.
Mm-hmm. But is it possible, just to go back to the labeling issue, and I want to move forward after that, but is it possible that because the industry has been agreed now to do mandatory disclosure, which would include a QR code, which means you could scan it on your phone, but it wouldn't say, the text would not say contains genetically engineered ingredients, which is what Vermont wants everyone to do.
Or a logo or words.
Or logo or words.
I mean, I think
there's flexibility, but it's not mandatory on pack, which is what the labeling advocates wanted. Mm-hmm. Is it possible that mandatory on pack would end up just not being a big deal? People would see it, accept it, keep making the same choices, move on, and this has been a huge fight about very little. I mean, is it possible that, let's say the Congress doesn't get this done? They're not the most effective these days, so I'm not totally counting on them to get the bill done, even though it's bipartisan, has industry support. I still don't know. Maybe it will happen. But if Vermont becomes the national standard, which does require words on the package, on the back, underneath the nutrition facts, if that does go through and everyone has to label, a lot of companies are already labeling, what if it turns out it just doesn't matter and people accept it and say, oh, that's nice, they're disclosing it, and move on? Is that possible that that's the outcome here?
If that's the outcome and public trust level rises in the tool, I think I'm going to call it a win.
Yeah, I would too. Like I said, I think
But
a
we don't really
national,
know,
a
right,
national
how-
labeling approach is the right way to go. The challenge is just don't do it city by city and state by state. That would be,
The
that would
patchwork
really,
is,
the
yeah.
patchwork
And I think
would be
everyone
so
agrees that the
disruptive.
patchwork is a bad idea.
But that's where we
That-
were
yeah.
starting with
Right.
California,
Right.
Colorado, everybody setting up a different system with different exceptions. It was so confusing that no one could understand the system. Having it done at a federal level, just like we have the organic standard, just makes all kinds of sense.
Do you think that Congress will get this done?
I hope so. I hope so. I mean, I think it's, it is very logical. It's an outcome that I think serves both the consumers and agriculture and farmers and everybody involved to have a system that's transparent and functioning.